What's your favorite Denzel Washington film? This one is a post-apocalyptic samurai film with one of the best scores of 2010. It's day 89 of 365. Today's movie, The Book of Eli. Directed by the Hughes brothers and starring Denzel Washington, Mila Kunis, and Gary Oldman, this would have been my favorite film of 2010 if it weren't for Scott Pilgrim coming out later on that year. This is, however, one of the best plot twists of 2010, and in my 3 points later, I will defend why this plot point not only makes sense thematically, but within the story. The twist is actually so good that when I finished watching the movie and the credits rolled, I left and walked right into the very next theater showing the film again, just to make sure that the twist worked, and spoilers, it works. I know the Wikipedia says that this is a neo-Western, but I feel like all the best Westerns are basically just dressed up samurai films anyways, so my point at the top still stands. The first whole action sequence is shot just like a Kurosawa film, so with spoilers up ahead, let's talk about my 3 favorite things about The Book of Eli. The first thing I love so much about this movie is its black and white desaturated look. This is something that is not only kind of copying the samurai thing like I brought up, but also many old black and white Westerns. It's very fitting for this kind of bleak world, this kind of bleak storytelling, these kind of bleak characters. But on top of that, and I don't know how many people notice this because I didn't see much written about it at the time or even currently, the movie saturates in color once they get away from the wasteland. Once they end up in San Francisco, they actually add the color back into the film in a very poignant scene where Mila Kunis' character Solaris and Denzel Washington character Eli swap places in the boat, putting the future ahead and behind of each of them respectively, almost giving us a kind of clue as to what could happen in a future story. Normally these kinds of Western stories don't have sequels or follow-ups, but it's saying we could if we wanted one, and I really like that there's a future ahead for the younger characters in the world. They even make a point of mentioning the age difference between the characters when they're first meeting earlier in the film. Now, if you've been watching this for a little while, you know that I normally have an issue with desaturated movies. I like a more colorful palette. I think if we're going to be making color films, we should make them colorful. So this movie still having a color palette is one of the few cases where I think this is kind of earned and necessary. It really adds to the storytelling overall, and this movie starts off in literally black and white ash. I think that's such a cool place to start versus the full color paletted ending that we end up in by the time we see our characters coming to final rest in their story. It kind of works twofold because after we've had the twist revealed to us, this is where the desaturation starts to turn off. And the movie could end quickly, but instead sits for a little while to allow us to absorb this twist and ending. That's giving us something to kind of think about for a second, and so that tells us that this choice is much more intentional than some kind of like Shyamalan aping thing from the time. Now, his twists are normally very integral to the plot, but there were a lot of movies that came from his watershed that wanted to make twists just a thing that they added. This movie's saying, no, this isn't just a twist. This is something that we can actually stack up behind with the storytelling choices that we made to this point. I'll get into that more with my 3rd point, but I just wanted to highlight the color choice of this movie at the very front as being very intentional and beautiful. The second thing I'd really love to highlight about the movie is its incredible set design. Post-apocalyptic movies are often all about the set dressing. We've seen that in modern stuff like the Fallout series literally being made or broken by its set design. But this movie in particular, being set in New Mexico, is giving us a wasteland that we don't often see. This is very intentionally trying to give us that kind of more Western setting. This is why it's called neo-Western on the Wikipedia page. But outside of the set design, the way that they lay out the buildings, the cities, every little aspect of the movie feels like just dilapidations of our world and not intentional, overly dressed up barbed wire and something that's wholly separate in its visual palette. Running that line between something being believably post-apocalyptic and something being so dilapidated that it feels like more time has passed than what they've told us. I kind of love the way this movie threads that needle. It's a difficult thing to do, and I love to call attention to this kind of stuff. The Walking Dead is one that I've highlighted before. For as much of the things that I like about it, its set design is often just so dilapidated that it's almost unbelievable the amount of time that has passed. Then you have things like Fallout where an incredible amount of time has passed and there's still so much left over of our world this really is trying to hit the middle point of that and say, this is a world you recognize and remember, but it's also in the kind of more inhospitable alien settings of our current world. If you've ever been through the desert in New Mexico, it's pretty alien and deserted out there. So this is something that has been built up because this is the kind of world they live in all over, apparently. And I really like the set design that's going on. It helps me fall into the movie so quickly to see so many different kinds of biomes, but they're all kind of linked together. They all feel homogenous to each other. And I really love that it creates its own world. There's also something to be said about the biblical aspect of this as well. All of the Bible takes place in desert settings. They're very specific about the locations that are mentioned in the Bible and where these stories come from. And so I really love that this movie is very biblical in its wasteland setting as well. You can almost replace any of these locations with like a biblical Canaan or Jerusalem or something of that nature outside of the like main cities and being very dilapidated, where people have just kind of learned to get along with the wasteland. I really enjoy that, and it's tonally very accurate for the kind of story that they're trying to tell here. The third and final thing that I love about the Book of Eli is that the twist really, really works. No, I fucking promise. Now, I have to establish one thing before you'll really believe me, and the thing I need to establish is that God canonically exists in the Book of Eli universe. I know. That's a big one to wrap your mind around, but we can see him at work across the entire plot to imply his existence. And if that weren't enough, the whole plot is wrapped around a God MacGuffin. And if that's not enough for you, Eli walks by faith and not by sight. Literally. This is his samurai code, which is why I call it a samurai film. Eli is heading west. He doesn't know if he's on the right latitude or longitude. He just knows that San Francisco is west, and that is where he will be able to transcribe his Bible. He knows that's where he's supposed to end up. He may not even know that's exactly where, he just knows that's where his story will end. And by the time he's shot and knowing that he's going to die soon, he knows he has just enough time to complete his mission, and that's why he knows this is the place to stop. If we move backwards from there, things like him being able to get into shootouts, firefights, bow and arrow competitions, slice 'em ups, you name it. He's moving through faith. He's able to hear the people around him, sure, but the fact that he's able to shoot someone off of the roof in the middle of a town comes down solely to the fact that he's walking by faith, shooting by faith, living by faith. Everything that he does is an act of faith. To establish this is one of the first things we're actually shown about his character. And I bet you've never even thought about the movie in this way. When we meet Eli on the road, he has many, many clues to the fact that he can't see. We see him, and the way he interacts with the world is through listening first. I noticed this on my second rewatch the same day that I saw it the first time, and it holds true on my recent rewatch. When he first investigates the car with the skeleton in it, he's listening. He never actually has to investigate with his eyes to figure things out. When he finds the body hung up in the room, he smells it first and then investigates it with his hand. He doesn't have to have seen it. But where the faith thing comes in is where he puts in his headphones to listen to his iPod. He's a blind man choosing to blind himself further to the world by having to rely on his taste, touch, and sense of feeling to navigate his night. Literally living by faith that he will survive the night into the next day. That's how actively he lives by faith in this world, that he's willing to forego his hearing just to lay down at night and enjoy his music. He wouldn't do that unless he was fully assured within himself that God was going to protect him. I think more proof of God's existence within the story. When he's hungry, God provides, just like prophets in the Bible would be provided for by the crows. He shoots a crow out of the air with his bow and arrow. That is literally biblical faith that he's displaying within the movie. If you watch the movie with the idea in mind that God is real and that Eli is living entirely by faith, every single step he takes is divinely guided. It's almost as if he moves through this plot outside of the plot. It's kind of crazy to watch through 2025 eyes and understanding media literacy, and also with my biblical background, to see the kind of story that they're telling here. It makes it almost more fun to go along with it. So much of the internet I've seen is dedicated to the idea that he's not blind, actually, that maybe he just has partial blindness, maybe he's just becoming blind across the plot of the movie. But no, I maintain that he's fully 100% legally blind from the get-go. He was literally blinded by the light of the apocalypse. And that's why light is such a big thing within this story. Solana, as Mila Kunis' character, that's a sun root word in the name. We see Ray Winston's character, when he's dying, take his glasses off to look at the sun for the first time in what is probably years because it's so scorched out on the earth. When we see Eli wake up the next morning after his living a night of faith listening to his iPod, he opens his eyes to the sun, showing us that he probably was sighted before and knows to look up to it, showing us also the cataracts in his eyes, but then he closes his eyes and allows the sun to warm his face. That's how a blind person sees the sun. And so I really think that this twist is told to us from the very beginning and works really well. And also, the fact that he has faith in himself to be able to recite the Bible at the end. He's been learning it and reciting it to himself over and over in his head. So the first thing that he says to himself, first thing in the morning, is, God said, let there be light. It's the most of the Bible that we ever get to hear within this movie are the first 3 verses that very specifically mention light. Light is very important to our sight as a thing. We don't have sight without light. And so the fact that he's willing to navigate a world that is burnt with brightness through his darkness, and that is why he has faith, it just makes the movie more powerful. Yeah, you have to allow some things, but if you need a perfectly literal interpretation of the world, you probably shouldn't be watching samurai films, dog. All I'm saying, these movies are purposefully artistic and metaphorical. And so a blind samurai, that's a story we've actually seen before. It's not impossible. Their heightened senses, sure, can add to the realism if you need the realism, but this is a story that's begging you to take it as metaphorically as the Bible is meant to be taken. And so that's my defense. He is blind 100%, and the movie is better for it if you're willing to allow that maybe God guides his hand to shoot someone off of a roof. But what do you think? Have I gone too hard in the paint here in saying that he is 100% blind? Are you one of the blindness truthers that think he might be partially sighted at least? Did you even like this movie? I know this was one of my favorites from 2010, but I might be a little biased in that. We're keeping with the religious themes in our next movie and talking about the very frightening and very often weird Legion. And as always, I'll see you tomorrow.